Welcome to Fireside Chats. My name is Magela Pillai, and today we are looking at the subject of self-acknowledgement and feeling invisible. There are millions across the globe who suffer from this, the feeling that nobody sees me, nobody hears me, and no one knows me. This feeling can be very tragic, and it can have far-reaching consequences for you as an individual. If you are feeling this way, please do not feel alone. Help is at hand. In this series, we look at the core of spirituality. We look at how spiritual understanding can impact on your consciousness as an individual. We also ask you to look at whether you are satisfied with your relationship with God, if you have a relationship with Him at all, and whether you enjoy a balance between your inner and your outer world. To take the subject up with us and to share insight into it, I have in the studio with me Sister Denise, who has been practicing Rajyoga Meditation for over 40 years. Sister Denise, very, very warm welcome.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for joining us. The feeling of invisibility, I think, is the worst feeling a human being can have. I once heard it said that being ignored is actually worse than being physically attacked, because no attention is worse than bad attention or negative attention. Tell me, what brings a human being to the state where they feel as if they're nobody or nothing?
I think it's connected with a lot of preconceptions that are running around in our society. It's a very common way to behave, is to assert your importance vis-a-vis another person by treating them as if they don't exist. Because then you put them on the defensive. It's a power play thing. And the person who is expecting to be seen and acknowledged and so on is making an assumption that obviously I am a good person, obviously anybody can see me and will acknowledge me and so on. And then when they don't, it's a tremendous confusion and shock, and it destabilizes them, and it's designed to do that. And there are sometimes whole cultures that do that. I think that in terms of the social hierarchy, it operates that people at the top of the hierarchy maintain their position by conveying to the people lower down in the hierarchy that they don't exist. And this is very disempowering. So it keeps the status quo, and it makes people feel very despairing and very depressed. And it can, in some cases, when it becomes quite strong, provoke a backlash. And there you get social conflict. I think it occurs very much in societies where there is multiple races, multiple social stratifications. And then I've seen this in countries, say new countries, where there are waves of immigration. So whoever is on the bottom of the pile is always dealt with in that way, that you don't exist, which means we wish you didn't exist. We're quite happy that you exist if we're one level up because you came along, but otherwise you don't exist. Part of it is connected with large populations. So when populations are very large, people don't know each other, so they tend to generalize, and in the generalization comes more generalized stratification. And if you feel that your position is in any way threatened, one of the ways you'll deal with it is by making a person feel that they don't exist. I've experienced it a great deal. And just looking at my own experience of how I deal with it, or how I have dealt with it, it's very much to do with making the self feel, well, I know who I am, and if you don't know who I am, it's not my problem. It's very important to not make it your problem.
Other people's attitude of you shouldn't become your problem.
Yeah, because what happens is they would probably like it to become your problem. They would like you to feel, subservient or desirous to please or something like this, because it will provoke that kind of unhealthy reactive behavior. But it's very important not to go down that road, because it's very bad for your self-respect, very bad for your dignity. But the downside is that it keeps groups of people separate. A person who is not just feels invisible, but knows very well, because there's plenty of evidence that they are being treated as invisible, they will actually disconnect from that group of people, and then they will start talking about them as them. And then you get a them and an us. Us who they think are invisible, we're actually not invisible to each other. It creates this division, and it's not healthy in a society. So, the persons who are spoken of or to or totally disregarded, they have to go into a survival mode in which they have to shore up one another, or if it's individual, you have to shore up yourself. You'll sometimes retreat into your own world, and you will put yourself up in your own eyes, put the other people down, even though they are putting themselves up and putting you down, but you will reverse it. And it creates a big chasm between different groups of people. So I think that if you are true to your practice of spirituality, you have to deal with it in a different way. If you are being treated as invisible, you're going to have to assert yourself and make the others see you. You also have to assert yourself to yourself, so that if the others don't see you, it's their problem, it's not my problem. But you have to be careful that you don't go into the us and them, you see, which is why you have to keep on approaching those who do not see you and make them see you, you see. And it's quite difficult to get people who are misbehaving to behave properly. But I think you also need to make yourself feel right, feel good. You need to assert yourself, assert your visibility to God, and be very careful not to go into any of those behaviors of a more survival nature, and your consciousness has to be very strong, so that you force the situation, you challenge on a vibrational level those attitudes, and that's what you have to do.
Is it ever okay to prove yourself? Does that not become a form of inverted ego? You treat me like dirt, so I will show you. Is that not?
But then you're coming from a place of anger and vindictiveness.
Yes.
You ignore me, I'm going to shine until such time as you see me, and whether you see me or not, I don't really care, but I'm going to shine anyway. If you don't see me, it doesn't mean I'm not visible, It's really to not allow that behavior to cause you to make yourself even more invisible than the other people want you to be, which is part of the process of that.
Take us through the journey of self-acknowledgement. I think I've shared this before, that I once heard it said that the deepest need we all have is to feel seen, heard, not necessarily loved, but seen and heard. we very hungry for this on the outside. You know, you want it from your parents, you want it from your siblings, you want it from your teachers, etc. And then that list keeps growing. And you have people who throughout their lives want to be seen and heard, because if someone doesn't see me, then you automatically think there's something wrong with you. Now, how does one replace that with self-acknowledgement? And does it replace it, Denise, or do you still hunger for it on the external?
I think it's very important to address that hunger, and it's part of maturity to validate yourself. You know, if you're good at something, and you know you're good at something, and people all around poo-poo your talent and capability, then you need to be able to interpret that they know that you're good, but they don't want you to think that they think that you're good. You know, this happens, and you have to detect that and disregard that whole game and just know that you're good and carry on, you see, because if you allow that behavior to cause you to have doubt in yourself and think that what they're telling you is the truth, that is naivety, that is not very sharp. So yes, you have to know, I know that I'm good, I don't have to be egotistical about it, I don't have to try to get them to tell me and everybody else that I'm good. It's good enough that I know that I'm good, and I'm going to carry on developing myself, and that's that. You see, it's a kind of assertiveness.
Many people carry this, I think it's a type of fear that I'm not good enough, even though there may be evidence in your character to the contrary. How does one redress this?
Well, it's a message that you have received from early in your life, from your external moral authorities, your parents, your teachers, the surrounding society who gives you that propaganda. And so you really need to tell yourself again and again and again, this is good enough for me. And that means you need to spend a lot of time with yourself and really look at criteria for yourself, you see, because if you have internalized that voice which comes from outside, first of all, you need to know that you did that and that that was not a good thing to do. Second of all, you have to decide, okay, what is enough? Enough for whom? Enough for what? You know, this word enough is a very deceptive word. And so you say to yourself, well, you know, I'm a child of God. I've got a clean conscience. I fulfill my duties. I develop my character. I develop my talents. Check yourself against, you know, the body of spiritual knowledge that we have is a really good checklist, and it exists. It's coming from the mind of God. It's not coming from people. And, you know, part of the message of spirituality is do not give importance to the voice of public opinion.
Really?
Because public opinion is very fickle and not at all reliable.
Okay, Sister Denise, I'm going to interject there. One is public opinion, and the other is the voice of significant others in our lives. We all have people in our inner circle, parents, spouses, teachers, friends, siblings whose opinion means the world to us, whom we love. And if they have a negative attitude towards us and make us feel less than worthy, how do you deal with that? Because because it can hurt you very badly if somebody you love rejects you or treats you badly.
But then, you see, what I think is a good way to deal with it is ask yourself, do I respect this person? Because if you ask yourself, do I respect this person, means do I respect their opinion? Do I respect how they conduct themselves? Because, you know, if it may be somebody who's a significant person, but they behave badly. And so You may love them because of your blood connection or whatever, but do you respect them? Because there you're connecting yourself with your conscience. Do you agree with how they conduct themselves, or do you find them hypocritical or whatever? If you don't respect them, that lack of respect creates a space so that if they do reject you, you don't respect them anyway, so it doesn't matter, you see. And there you have to fall back on your own devices, and you look around in the world and you see, is there anybody that you do respect? It may not be a living person, it may be a writer, maybe a philosopher. It could have a number of sources, but I think it's very important to see, who do you respect in this world? Because your respect for someone corresponds to somebody who is walking their talk. If you have any kind of connection with someone who's walking their talk, you will be more interested in what they have to say, but you will still calculate it, you will still evaluate it. The more you are mature and self-reliant, the more you'll be able to take other people's opinions with a pinch of salt. And if it really sits well with you that, what this person is telling me is worthwhile constructive criticism, I will pay attention, I'll work on that. But if it's just a nasty statement, disregard.
Yes, Denise, say we're talking about somebody who's interested in commencing their journey of spirituality. And the first thing that they become aware of is their lack of self-worth, a gaping hole where their self-respect should have been. How do you begin to repair what is broken? Is it self-work? Do you take assistance? Do you go see a psychologist to give you a kickstart? Is it just spirituality that's the antidote? Because I'm of the view... It doesn't
really operate like that. A person can begin their spiritual journey. They may not even know they're beginning a spiritual journey. They'll encounter something that awakens them spiritually. They're very unlikely at such a time to have such type of a feeling about themselves. That's much more likely to happen down the line, you see. Because when you start your spiritual journey, you generally get something of a honeymoon. You start to feel peaceful, loveful.
Is that like a high?
You get a high.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And that high it tells you that, hey, this is something good. And it gives you a kind of internal encouragement to pursue it. And then you go along after a little while, and then you have got into it, and then you start to see the dark side of yourself. But because you've got into it a certain way, you've accumulated a little something at least. So you've got something with which to deal with your dark side, and maybe you have some contacts and connections who are also doing their spiritual journey, so you're in a better position to begin the process of dealing with your dark side. It's very unlikely that you deal with it right away. In the case where you do, it's usually where you've had some sort of a big shock to wake you up from the darkness of your bad behavior, and that shock has told you that, one of the ways that you can get your act together is take a look at your spiritual side and do that. And again, they will still have nice experiences when they start to look at their spiritual side, and then it'll turn and say, okay, now it's time to deal with your dark side properly, really open this up, It's more like that.
The second part of my question is, how then do you begin to repair? Now that you are aware of your dark side and your total lack of self-worth, how do you build from sub-zero?
Baby steps. You begin, I'm a soul, not a body. I'm eternal. I'm a child of God. I'm loved by God. I'm redeemable, I'm lovable, step by step by step. And you start to practice. I'm a soul operating through this body. I have a role. Past is past. It's a game. There's many little statements and aphorisms and so on that you can begin to apply to your feelings at any given time. And you begin to get into the discipline of spiritual practice. You begin to have a regular morning and evening meditation. And if you pay proper attention on just doing that and just having a little bit of exposure to spiritual study, these are the building blocks of your stage.
God, how does he come to the rescue of one of his children who is in this space? Do you go to God and say, listen, I feel like nothing?
Well, you can.
Okay, and then what happens?
It comes back to this question of sincerity, and you can say, oh God, I don't know who I am, I don't know what I am, but I'm in big trouble, I need help. And you really put yourself out there, and pretty invariably you will get some kind of a response, some sign, somebody will come into your life, something will happen which will enable you to get going, and that is a very wonderful phenomenon.
Sister Denise, does one with a history of low self-esteem come to a stage where you are at peace with yourself and the world?
Low self-esteem is countered through feeling of accomplishment.
Okay.
And so when you start to apply yourself to doing things that are worthwhile, that are charitable, that are beneficial, and you start to receive some kind of positive feedback from that, all that begins to create a feeling of accomplishment, which is undeniable, so that your feeling of low self-esteem is offset by that sense of accomplishment. And the sense of accomplishment is a very positive energy that can move you away from falling into that pit or that abyss of negative self-view.
One last question. Feelings. Do you use your feelings as a yardstick to measure how good you're doing, whether you're in the same space that you used to be? Do your feelings change when you feel heard and seen?
I think that your feelings can be deceptive. So you need to be aware of your feelings, but you also need to bring to bear your understanding, because your understanding is a lot more stable, a lot less volatile than your feelings. Because especially when the soul is weak, the feelings are up and down and all over the place like a butterfly, and you really cannot use it as a yardstick, because you may be in a down dip and say, okay, that is the average. It's not. The average is somewhere in the middle between all the ups and downs. And I think what happens to people is the distance between the ups and downs changes, and you start to have a more level curve of your highs and lows. You don't go so high or so low, and that is a good sign.
Okay, so there is hope for people who feel invisible.
Really want to come out of that kind of problem or any other kind of problem, you can, but you have to reach out and try and find out, what do I need to do, who do I need to get information from, and start the process. And you are doing something for yourself. You can't just expect that something's going to fall down from the sky. You may get an indicator, a sign, an encouragement, but you have to pick it up and do something with it for yourself.
On that note, thank you. I hope that there is many people who are able to hear and feel and more experience the wisdom of that which you just shared. So thank you.
Thank you.
So there you have it. Sister Denise has touched on the subject of feeling invisible and self-acknowledgement. If you find yourself in this position, be aware that there are millions across the globe who feel like this. Sister Denise shared what one can do to redress your own past, to heal, to come back, to reach a state of self-respect. And also, she also shared how one can take power from God in order to put right that which has gone wrong in your own life. Sister Denise shared particularly that there are no shortcuts. It's intensive, hard work. But the feeling I got from listening to her this half hour is that you are worth it. And I hope that you know you are worth it. And I think, especially for me, the message was that God is waiting for you to make this journey so that He could hold your hand as you walk through it. I hope that you have benefited from this talk, and I hope that you will be able to use this very deep message to heal. Thank you and goodbye.